Today we're making beef stroganoff, and the macros for today are 568 calories per portion, 52 grams of proteins, 64 grams of carbs and 11 grams of fat. And I'm using 1200 grams of beef knuckle for this, which is quite a lean cut, but I know that a lot of people like to use chuck as well, so in the spreadsheet for the recipe and the macros I have included a chuck, so you can just switch from the beef knuckle to the chuck if you prefer to use the chuck, and the macros and everything should follow. So what we need to do is simply trim off the fat, and then we're going to cut the meat in relatively large chunks. I'm going to be making 6 portions of this, so 200 grams of meat per portion, and it's easier to divide this into lunch boxes that have the same amount of protein if the meat is relatively large, because what I like to do is to fish everything out and to measure it and make sure that each lunch box that I make have the same amount of proteins, but if you want to wing it, then that's fine too. Then we're simply gonna salt our meat on all sides and add some pepper as well. Then we're gonna be measuring out some Wercherstershire sauce, and we're gonna use 35 grams of that. And to that we're going to add 50 grams of soy sauce. Then we're going to chop up 1 onion. I only had small ones, so I'm using 2, and all of my knives are out for sharpening, so this was all I had. And then we're gonna slice 250 grams of button mushrooms. And peel 3 to 5 cloves of garlic. I'm using 5, but that depends on how much garlic you want. I like to cut the ends of the garlic and then make a cut through, but doesn't split it, but a bit over halfway. Then the peels just come right off. Then we're going to measure out 100 grams of tomato paste. And then it's time to heat up our pan. What I like to do is to use 2 pans, one stainless steel pan and one Dutch oven. You can do this entirely in the Dutch oven, but I think that's much more difficult because it's difficult to stir and everything when you have all the ingredients in. So I like to do this first in the stainless steel pan and then transfer everything to the Dutch oven. And we're going to be using in total 1 tablespoon of cooking oil. So we're going to divide it up, and we're going to use half of that for the first batch of meat because we can't sear everything at the same time. And then we're going to save half and use that for the other half of the meat. Simply sear it, all sides. And when you're done searing it, we're going to transfer that to our Dutch oven. And as you can tell, things have started to burn in our stainless steel pan, but that's going to be fine. We're going to deglaze that later, so we don't need to worry about that. And it's not going to be difficult to clean or anything. It's going to be fine. So rest out the oil, sear the rest of the meat, and use the rest of the oil, sear the rest of the meat. And once we're done that, as you can see, everything looking quite burned. But then we're going to add our onions, and we are going to add some salt, and we're going to use our onions to start the glaze in the pan, which works quite well. We don't need the same heat here. We used high heat for searing the meat, but then we can go to medium to start searing our onion and the glaze in the pan. After a while, when the onions have fried, we're going to add the garlic, and we want to add the garlic when we are 1 or 2 minutes away from being done. And then we're going to add some cooking wine to really get the pan deglazed, and we're going to use 2 deciliters of white wine, and then we're simply going to let that reduce. Now we're going to get all of those flavors into our Dutch oven as well, so nothing will be left behind. After that, it's time to sear our mushrooms. Then we're gonna crank the heat up again, add some more salt and some pepper, and then we're gonna sear our mushrooms. When we're done with that, it's time to add our tomato paste and our flour, and to sear that for a little while. If you're using high heat for the mushrooms, you should lower the heat when you add the tomato paste and the flour, otherwise everything will burn. So 2 tablespoons of flour. Simply sear that for a few minutes, and everything's gonna stick to the pan as well, so we're gonna add some water. In total, I'm using 1 liter of water to boil this later on, so I'm using some of that water just to deglaze the pan, and then we're gonna add the rest of the water. Basically, all you need to do is to cover this. If you use too much water, it doesn't really matter. All you need to do is reduce it when we're almost done. So all you need to do is basically just cover the meat. I think 0.7 liters of water should be fine. But if you use more, then just reduce it a bit more once we get to that. Then we're going to use 2 tablespoons of veal fond. Stir that in. And also 2 tablespoons of Dijon mustard. And then just put the lid on, and we're going to be bringing this to boil and let it cook for 2 hours. After 2 hours, everything's starting to become quite tender. The meat's easy to chew and everything. That means that we're almost done. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 3 deciliters of milk. And all we need to do after that is to reduce it to our desired consistency. This, as you can see, is really easy. It's a very low calorie dish that's quite delicious. As I said, I like to just measure all my meat and then divide it into boxes. 6 portions for this. That means that you know that you have the amount of proteins you need every day. And just put those boxes in the fridge. I like to add rice to mine, and 65 grams of rice per portion, but I don't like to freeze my rice, so I boil that the day before I need it. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy.